You're listening to a Rock Candy podcast.
Hey, I'm Andrew.
And I'm John.
Our show, Magnified Pod, is the only podcast that discusses culture, religion, politics, and deep dives into the discographies of the bands that shaped a generation of 90s youth group kids.
We share our thoughts on the Christian bookstore alternate universe scene we grew up in, our changing religious views, and the alternative music that formed us, going through albums track by track.
We've also interviewed band members, producers, filmmakers, and artists, and had fascinating, profound, and silly conversations along the way.
Check out Magnified Pod on the Rock Candy Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the 11 Life podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of 11 Life, coming to you straight from the Rock Candy Recordings studios here in beautiful Asheville, North Carolina. I really hope that your week has been beautiful, that you've taken the time to sing obnoxiously in the shower, that you have taken the time to call your parents and let them know that you love them, even though you know that you're going to have to listen to at least 10 minutes of complaints. And maybe that's okay, because sometimes complaints are just people letting you know how they're hurting. I'm slowly but surely figuring that one out. Huge hugs and high fives to everybody over at the 11 Life Facebook group. You're a whole big bunch of beautiful people, and I love you. Thank you so much for all the cool things that you're posting on the Facebook group, and to everybody who is hanging out on the 11 Life Discord server. It's a cool place to find like-minded people with which you can discuss topics that were brought up on this show, or maybe just share all of the crazy shit that you're into with other people who are probably into things as weird as you. I'm getting so excited about some beautiful projects that we have going on here at Rock Candy Recordings this spring. It's an amazing time, and it's filling up with such beautiful artists, singers, songwriters, podcasters, creators. I love all of it, and I feel so grateful to be exposed to so much magic from so many magical people. As always, thank you to anyone and everyone who is purchasing anything and everything from the Rock Candy Recordings online store. Every time that you purchase something from that store, you help to perpetuate content like this, and you have a whole lot of people over here on the other side of the computer who are forever grateful to you for doing that. Ooh, I cannot wait for y'all to hear this episode with the one and only Dead Emerson. I literally discovered this band on a Spotify playlist, and I absolutely fell in love. I think you're gonna do it too. I had an amazing time talking to the singer, songwriter, creator, god of the universe of Dead Emerson, Dean. And let me tell you something. We had a lot of fun. It was a really, really awesome conversation. We get into music, philosophy, intimacy, religion, and a little bit of silliness mixed in there for good measure. You can check out his band by going directly to the show notes for this show, and I highly, highly encourage you to do that. Also, while you were there on Spotify, give us a follow. All of those likes and hearts and plays and streams add up, and we are absolutely grateful for everybody who allows us to be a part of your day-to-day playlist and listening experience. You can get to the 11-7 Spotify right there in the show notes as well. Hey, let's not be long-winded on this one. Roll the windows up, get vibey, get chill, get ready for my conversation with the one and only Dead Emerson.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, awesome.
Did you get my FaceTime from my computer? Or so I like just FaceTimed you from my computer, but it said it didn't connect for whatever reason.
No, when you FaceTimed me from your computer, it went to my phone. And so I was trying to move it from my phone onto the FaceTime on my computer. It's so fucked up.
Oh my gosh.
I should know like how all of this stuff works, but I feel like it changes so fast that it's like I normally don't know that there's an issue until it's like we're right here in the middle of it, and it's like it's bonkers. So I'm sorry for all your troubles.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm just like FaceTime is always so funny because like sometimes it'll go to my phone, sometimes it'll go to my computer, but it never goes to the right one when I want it to go to the right one.
Right, so, right.
Yeah. So.
Oh, that's
man,
awesome.
How are you?
Dude, it's been a morning. I for whatever reason we have two dogs. And we put them like in our living room at night. So they have like a little cubby in the living room where they normally sleep. Our littlest one, Sophie, like barked incessantly all night long. We have no idea why she was doing this. We like tried to give her food, tried to give her everything. She just like would not calm down. So yeah, I look probably like I haven't slept all night, but it's just because of my dog. So yeah.
Well,
that and a chronic meth habit.
No. Well, anyways.
Just want to dive right in, see what's going on.
This just in, Dead Emerson's drug beat.
No, dude, how have you been?
Are we recording right now, or are you?
Everything's always recording.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Gotcha. I've been good. Just finished up a pretty big production project. So it's been like a nice like sigh of relief, just like having that like done and like out of the way, so I can focus on other things. It's been snowing a lot, which has been nice. I'm in Virginia right now.
We're not too far from each other.
Where are you?
I'm in Asheville.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm in like Northern Virginia, not Southern Virginia.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We spent a little bit of time in Abingdon and Damascus over the summer.
Like Damascus, Maryland?
No, Damascus, Virginia.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, man. Yeah, I was going to say, Damascus, Maryland is like, 20 minutes from where I grew up. But
oh, cool.
But yeah, no, I've never been to Damascus, Virginia. It's funny, like Virginia has a lot of the same town names as Maryland does. Like there's, I think there's like a Frederick, Virginia, and like an Olney, Virginia, which is like two towns in Maryland. So you just like pass by them, you're like, oh, this is interesting. Like,
yeah,
it is what it is. I guess they're kind of like two of the same states, pretty much.
Yeah, I feel like the farther north that you go, like the least creative they got with the naming of the things.
Yeah, everything's just named after like an old English settlement.
Yeah, that's it.
Except with like the Americanized pronunciation.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, we've been getting a ton of snow too. It's been super cold, like unprecedentedly cold here for some reason. We don't have to talk about weather and do like that the grown up thing. It's like, hey, does your kid go to my kid's preschool?
I gotta be honest, I am missing small talk. Like,
are you really?
I never thought I would say this, but like I have been missing small talk. Just various like interactions, especially with people that like that you meet at a bar, right? Because like somehow like you end up just talking about things that you don't normally talk about on a regular basis, just for the sake of like pleasantries and like,
right.
Like I just remember there was a kid in my like communications class in college that we talked about the weather every single day for the entire semester. And it was like, I knew exactly what the weather was for the rest of the week because of that. So small talk away, please.
No, that's fantastic. So I've never met anybody that's like that's been a comfort food for them. So that's
it's not, it's just I'm starved for intimacy.
Starved for intimacy, brother. I understand that.
What? It's still 2020. I don't know. We're in 2020 part 2.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like when all the pandemic stuff started happening, people were all like, "Oh man, there's going to be all of these corona babies," and people are like, I guess just with this idea that because everybody's stuck inside, everybody just must be like chronically fucking. And I was like, that's not the case for me or my friends. Like everything feels a little too stressful, or like there's just too many fires to put out. It seems like for the past 18 months that it's like, well, if that's your reality, good for you. Like I'm really happy for you. Go for it. But yeah, the starved for intimacy thing is real. Like I'm finding, like last night I went to go to meet up with a few friends at a small gathering, and I was just like completely in my head the entire time, like watching the conversations happen and being like, oh, I would love to be a part of that. And then people would ask me something and I feel like they would just get auto responses from me because I was overthinking their questions. So I'm just giving them auto responses as placeholders. Are you in your head as much as I am, or do you feel like you've got a better handle on things like that?
Oh, I think it goes like one of two ways. I think it's like sometimes I'll have I don't really like see a ton of people.
Yeah.
But I like the few times that there's been small gatherings of friends, like I've either like completely just forgotten how to socialize, or like I am so ready, just like, you know, I just want to talk about everything. Because I have noticed that people are more open to just talking about anything right now.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like sometimes like, you know, PC or BC before Corona,
Right.
You know, in 2019 BC, like, you know, if you, like, you could start a conversation, and if it was something that like someone wasn't really interested in talking about, they just, you know, you kind of shrug it off. But I think people just aren't talking to each other enough right now, so that's like they'll talk about anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, for sure. I totally get that. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you had mentioned when we first started talking that you just wrapped up like a big production. Is this like a full length that you wrapped up, or?
I would like to disclose that information. I'm keeping it under wraps right now.
Okay.
But you know, talk to me in like maybe 5 months again.
Because when did Siddhartha come out?
So that came out in, what was it, November, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was in November.
Okay. So was that maybe something that you pulled from this project that you're working on?
No. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, he just dropped a single, and he wants to keep whatever he's working on, which shall remain nameless, like under wraps. But there might be some dots to connect there. But no.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny because I think a lot of people have this notion that when artists release singles, like that means that there's like some sort of bigger project coming. Yeah. But that's completely changed. And like, I know people that like, or I know artists that like, they drop singles continuously for like 3 years and then like, you know, finally drop. The one thing that I don't like though, is that it like, and this is just a trend that, you know, isn't going to go away. It's not that it's bad or anything. I personally don't like it, but it's the dropping like 4 singles and then putting out an EP of the 4 release singles and then one more. It's just like, why?
I know it's so weird because I feel like you're hitting on something really important, which is that musicians who are trying to be savvy, who are trying to do their job, who are trying to say, hey, if I want to make a career out of this, like I need to make some smart moves and be able to kind of play the algorithm, play the system a little bit. They end up interfacing with Spotify in this way in which like it really is changing the landscape of how music gets released. So to stay relevant on that algorithm, it serves the algorithm for them to release those singles and then put out an EP that's kind of like not a shocker for anybody that's following the band, because they still get to keep those streams when they, you know, release a new thing and it ends up going back on the release radar and all of that stuff. But for fans, they're kind of sitting there like, yeah, but we're like invested. Like, we know that you put this stuff out. Like, we're not interested in new cover art. Like, we want new tunes. So like, I'm wondering how you are interfacing with that, because everybody's doing it differently and everybody kind of has a different approach to it. And I'm wondering where that is in your headspace right now.
Yeah. So I think singles, for like one-off singles, have always been more of a, what's the word? I like to look at like individual singles as like their own like separate events, right? You know, like kind of creating. I find it hard to really capture the extent of like of your artistic vision. Yeah. Because you're confined to 3.5 minutes, you know. Yeah. Or, you know, if you're Travis Scott, you get 5 minutes because you can throw 3 songs. That is the Sicko Mode is the Bohemian Rhapsody of today.
You love it.
It's great music, but I love the fact that like we reached this point where like someone can literally throw 3 separate songs on one song and it's like a top 10 song for like, you know, 10 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
But no, with projects, I've always kind of said I work better on projects as opposed to singles. Because I think one of the, like, I grew up listening to albums, you know, and and I think that's one of the things that is, you know, more common with, like, I'm right in between like millennial and Gen Z. So like, I don't consider myself like a hardcore millennial. I don't consider myself like a hardcore Gen Z.
Right.
Kind of like Gen Z a little bit more because like, you know, TikTok's a lot of fun. And,
Yes.
But yeah, so like one of the things that I loved about listening to albums growing up was that there were always songs that wouldn't fit as singles, like standalone, like they don't really do much, but it's like when you listen to them after listening to the 2 songs before it,
Yeah.
it has such a perfect place, and the context that has been set up for that song really gives you an appreciation, and it allows songwriters, it allows artists to expand what they can do. You know, like
and to tell longer narratives. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so that was definitely one of the things that like I like about writing projects is that there's not as much pressure to ensure that something hits within the first 30 seconds. Like you can have the development time, you know? And yeah. And so I don't know, that's kind of my thing. So I'm excited about this next project. And it's given me an opportunity to expand my wings a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's killer, man. Well, yeah, so we don't have to, if we keep talking about your new project, I'll keep digging and until you're like uncomfortable giving me information.
I'm so bad at keeping things under wraps too. Like, so like, yeah, can this move on?
Yeah, you and me both. I have, yeah. One of the things I noticed about you guys, or that turned me on to you guys, I realized that I'd seen some of your songs pop up on a few like indie playlists before. I think Sucker Punch was one of them. And for whatever reason, like I'll normally put on like the indie Spotify playlist. If I'm doing something menial around the studio, like if I'm cleaning or whatever, I'm like, well, what's new? Like what's happening now? Like what are people listening to? And I came across Siddhartha, and immediately like halfway through the song, I stopped what I was doing. I came and saved the track and like put it on the big studio speakers because I was like, this sounds so fucking cool. I want to know like what the mix decisions were. Like I want to know what it sounds like not playing on my phone. Like I want to kind of immerse myself in this thing. Can you talk to me a little bit about the production for that? Is that something that you did at home, or is it something that you went and did in a studio space? Like start me at chapter 1 for that track.
Yeah. That morning I woke up and I chose song. I was like, I'm gonna choose writing today. And I literally woke up, and that was like, I don't remember writing that song. I remember 30 minutes of just laughing my ass off.
Yes.
Like those are the best. Like I don't know. Those are the best songs. It's like the ones that you can like that you just have fun writing.
Yeah.
And and then I went straight into working on the production, into recording, and that was, I think, one of the songs that I like, the first songs that I had done where I had written the song entirely and then brought it to production. And actually I like that approach a lot better, just because it's it's a lot more efficient.
Yeah.
I hate like, sounding like I'm rushed to like make anything, but like, I definitely, one of the things that I've been focusing on more in the past 6 months is the process of bringing a song to completion. So now I honestly, I won't even start production on a song unless it's like fully written, like completely all the way through.
Yeah.
I still make beats from time to time, and those will like, and it kind of like, there's that aspect of, you're working on a beat and then you realize that the song that you had written a couple days earlier actually works really well. You just have to tweak some lyrics.
Yeah.
So that, I woke up, I started recording the guitar line, and then like, it was one of the few instances where I knew exactly what I wanted everything to sound like in my head before going into it. So I finished that production that day.
Wow.
Which that's so rare for me, because I will literally, like, I will spend months just getting like one snare right.
Yeah. Oh my God. So like, that's one of the things that I feel like I can't get away from. And
I don't think the snare is right in that song, just for what it's worth.
That the snare is fine. Like, yeah, like you and I are listening to productions and we're like, oh my gosh, like the snare needs to be right. Like there needs to be this, like, you know, a 5K cut on the kick and then a boost at 8. And like, we need to do all of this and like, let's clear out some mud and yada, yada, yada. And nobody else gives a shit. They're like listening to the song and they're waiting for those experiences like I had, where I'm just like hearing the song and I'm like, fucking vibe. Like, yes, that's cool. Like, I need to learn more about this.
But the thing is, you don't get those experiences if the drums don't sound the way that they do.
You're right. You're
So
right.
that's
That's
like
a fair
my big
point.
thing.
Yes,
You know?
that's totally a fair point. But it's kind of like it's a game. Like life is a game of choose your own neuroses, right? Like
Yeah.
I would much rather be obsessed with like kick and snare sounds and like production sounds than something else, than meth. Yeah, but that's fantastic. So did you record all of this stuff like at home?
Yeah, so I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I moved back to the East Coast in October just to get away from the city for a little bit. Everything was kind of closed down.
Yeah, yeah.
People were doing sessions, but it was very far and few in between.
Yeah.
So it just, and I had my own projects that I wanted to finish up. So I moved back home for a little bit, hold up, and then, and then planning to move back in the next couple months or so.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But yeah, I mean, everything I do is from my bedroom. Would I consider myself a bedroom artist? That is never the goal. No, like I don't want to be or I don't want what I make to come across as like something that is made from a bedroom.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of a junkie when it comes to like high quality sound and like making sure that, so yeah, my recent kick has been listening to the Grammy winners for best engineered non-classical category.
Yeah.
So eventually I would love to move into a studio because it's nice to be able to separate your workspace from your sleep space.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think that you're doing an absolutely fantastic job. And the more stuff that people send me to mix, or the way that I've seen productions kind of change over the last 10 years, it's just like, holy shit. Like you really can do everything that you need to do without a studio. And I feel like studios are kind of moving into this place where like, if they're not just serving a specific purpose, like, well, they have a drum kit set up or they have some cool synthesizers or whatever, or like specific gear, that people are going like kind of for the vibe of feeling like they're in a place that's meant to do this one thing. It kind of becomes their temple, their church, for the moment. It's like a place to kind of wrangle all of their creativity and to kind of come together and, I don't know, worship the sound gods or whatever and hope that they bestow. Right. Yeah. So, but that's awesome. What were those producers for you, like growing up, where you kind of started to turn on to production quality?
Oh my gosh. The first album that I ever listened to that I bought Ableton like the next day. Was So Long See You Tomorrow by Bombay Bicycle Club. Came out in 2014. They're such an underrated band. I understand why like Pitchfork slammed them because like the whole narrative that was being spun was that they were this high school band that won this battle of the bands, but Jack Stedman was one of the he was doing pretty much all the production for the band as an 18, 19-year-old kid up until his early 20s, and that was the first album that he was the sole producer.
Yeah.
And it like you really got to see what they were capable of, and what he was capable of as a producer. So yeah, I bought Ableton after that. I didn't really understand that a lot of that was done in the studio first and then translated to their live show. Yeah. So I was doing this weird thing where I was making Ableton tracks during band practice. Yes. And like hearing them played out. And then eventually just what happened was I it was hard finding other musicians that were like committed to doing the twice a week band practice to really get things tight. So I just started focusing on recording. That was my first foray into production.
I love that. So tell me how much of the track are compiled samples and texturing that you kind of created from pre-existing stuff, and is there anything in the track that's like live outside of guitars, and how are you able to pull all that off?
For Siddhartha?
For Siddhartha, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so while I would love to do live drums, that is my kind of the next step, I think. It's obviously really hard to do that from a bedroom. Yeah. So everything's sample driven, but I have a pretty decent way of faking it. Which means that I just go in and I like mess up the velocity. I literally spend hours just like option right on one note to get it to the right place. Yeah. So, because, I don't believe in quantizing, but I believe in the groove. Like if you can't dance to music, or if there's not like some sort of like beat to it, then it's like, it's throw it out, well, not always, but so and then generally, like sometimes I'll throw on like a phaser and like the high end to just do that subtle mix to add like just like those little tricks to make it seem not the same sample over and over again. Right. And then sometimes I'll do like EQ automations even. Like I have the API 560. Yep. I use that a lot for like synthesizers, occasionally for drums, and I'll literally take one of those knobs and just like move it up and down a little bit to give like a little bit more life. I love it. So do you end up mixing your own stuff too, or do you end up outsourcing the mix? I would love to outsource the mix always. Obviously you got to pay to outsource the mix, and, right, and sometimes the budget doesn't allow for that. So I guess really what I do is I get it to a certain point that it's listenable and good enough. Good enough. I don't consider myself a mixing engineer by any stretch of the imagination. But I get it to a point where it's good enough, and then I send it to one of my buddies that is a mixing engineer, and he does the mastering. That's amazing. So that's great. That's great. I want you to talk to me a little bit about your vocal sound on that song in particular. I think you did such a really cool job of crafting a kind of like lo-fi but present indie college rock vibe, but like for 2021 kind of a sound. And I love how towards the end of the song it like starts to break up really bad, like as you kind of get, as your inflection, as your velocity starts changing. So I thought that was super cool, and I was like, I wonder if this is just the kind of thing where he just has like a dynamic mic and he's just like going for broke with it and then compressing the shit out of it later, or if you're doing exactly what you're talking about, you're getting neurotic about how you're automating your plugins and stuff around that, or so I use this AKG C414. I mean, it's pretty, I have the vocal version, so there's that nice high-end boost. Yeah. That song was recorded before I had the Apollo interface and like all the UAD stuff. So I'm trying to remember what I did. I was running it through a Steinberg UR44. Like I bought it for like $200 when I was a senior in high school. And just using the cracked wave plugins. I think I used the Kramer tape for that. That's what gave it that slap back. Yeah. Trying to think. I do remember like I wasn't super happy with the vocal mix on that. So hearing you say that is like a huge compliment, because I'm like, maybe I don't have to try that hard. But yeah, I think the goal was like you said, sort of that more college rock aspect to it. Yeah. But making sure that you could still hear everything. Yeah. I guess it's only been like very recently that I've gotten a much better handle on what to do with vocals and how to mix vocals. I think a lot of the times I was just kind of throwing things at the wall and then going on YouTube, watching Mixing with the Masters, and then like,
oh my God.
Tom Elmhurst doesn't like the 900 hertz range. Okay, let me try ducking there. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay, that works. I understand what that sounds like now.
Right.
So, yeah, that was that process. Just throw things at the wall, hope they stick, you know?
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great. I feel like that's how a lot of people learn. And I mean, it's an old trope, but like there's so much. It's so easy to kind of get caught in the rabbit hole of like you're able to get on the internet now and see people who are like at the very top of their craft do these things and like share their knowledge with you, and they all will contradict each other when they're talking about their approaches to production or like where they want to cut or where they want to boost, and they all have different workflows.
I think they do that on purpose. I seriously, I'm convinced that there are some mixing engineers that they get on like, you know, Mixing with the Masters or something, and they'll just like say the most BS thing and like be like, yeah, that works for me. Like it doesn't work for everybody else, but it's like literally just like throw people off the scent of how to mix vocals well.
Like they immediately get off camera and they call CLA and they're like, you're never going to guess this bullshit that I just said. Oh man. Yeah, that's so good. I think, so I'm totally open to your conspiracy theory about that the top mix engineers in the world are actually trying to fuck up everybody else's mixes. But I think that it's indicative of like the longer that I've done this, the more projects that I've worked on, either for major labels or indie labels or just independent stuff, the more that I see sessions come in, the more I see other people mix. I honestly think that people don't talk enough about developing your ears and developing your imagination of what you want the song to sound like, and then using these other mixes as a reference point to just make sure that your quality is there. But like as soon as you start throwing tracks into a session, like you can make a sound, like you get just with a simple like mix decision, you can change the entire direction of a track. And a lot of it really just has to do with like, you know, you're a wizard, Harry, you know, like what spell are you going to cast on this today? Like it's up to you. You're as strong of a wizard as your imagination is.
You know, that's actually interesting that you say that, because one of the things I've been thinking of recently is in the early 2000s with like, you know, Max Martin and a lot of the big pop producers, the wave that sort of came was the songwriter producer, you know, before like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like you hired a producer, they would come in, you know, the song was already written, stuff like that. But once you started getting songwriters and producers all in the same person, like that's when you really saw a lot of these like super catchy, I don't want to say formulaic, but like you saw like the development of the Max Martin formula you know, the XY formula. I think now what's happening is because music production is so much more accessible, I think we're starting to see more producers that are also mixing engineers. So, because I think now, like, you have to be able to produce and mix to a certain point.
Yeah.
Because, you know, unfortunately, everything's on a budget nowadays.
Yeah.
But what's cool about that is that, like you said, there's a lot of quality that comes out of that process. You know, like, have you listened to any of the most recent Perfume Genius albums?
None of the recent stuff. I'm familiar with some of the older stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, Blake Mills, like, I have to give him as much credit as possible. And then, obviously, Perfume Genius and his partner Alan, like, they, oh my gosh, like, everything that they do is so unique, but fits so well within the perfect time, like within the landscape. Like, you know, you listen to Perfume Genius, like this one song Describe off of his most recent album, and the vocals are completely panned to the left, right? There's no center vocal, but it gives this quality, this aspect of like ASMR that just is so perfect. And then what was it? And then the song Jason, that off his most recent album as well, they were reviving old recording techniques for drums. Like they're panning the drums completely to the right or completely to the left, which is what they did back in the 60s with the Beatles, you know? And so hearing older or forgotten recording techniques like that, I can't remember the last time I heard a song where the drums were deadpan to the right. You know, they're always in the center. The kick's always, you know, but it adds such a characteristic to the sound and to the space that the song creates. And so I actually, you know, I did that in one of my most recent songs. So.
Which shall remain nameless. You're doing it. You're letting everybody know a little bit more information. That's fantastic, man. Yeah, I love getting into all of that stuff. I love seeing different people's like minds work on songs. And I've found over the last few years, I really enjoy sort of taking other people's ideas and being like, oh, I can make this, I can elevate this to something beyond where this is. I've really enjoyed that. I really want to know about your songwriting process. You had said like for Siddhartha, you just kind of like wake up and you catch a vibe and you're like, today I'm writing, I'm deciding, which I already feel like is a really important thing to discuss, of like waking up and deciding like today, even though I might not be inspired at all, I'm just going to sit down and go through the motions of writing. That's part of like honing your craft. Like that's part of being an artist. And I feel like it's something you have to do if you want to keep creating things. Like everybody that I know that sits around and waits for inspiration to strike them hasn't put anything out in the last 5 years. So, so there's that. But is there is there a place that you can go that you feel like kind of taps you into the idea stream in the universe?
I don't know. It's funny because definitely the best songs come from those moments of inspiration. And it's like, and so I don't want to say like, don't wait until you're inspired. But there are certain things that you can do to ensure that you're getting that creative energy continually flowing. And, you know, part of the reason I really do miss going out is because a lot of the times creative energy comes from being around people. As introverted as all the songwriters and all the producers are, like our creative energy comes from other people and comes from the world around us. And so I think that's been one of, I don't want to say the struggles of coronavirus and lockdown, but one of the challenges to overcome, you know, sourcing your inspirations from new places. You know, I go on walks a lot. I started exercising a lot more. I think just opening yourself up to new experiences as well. Even if you kind of view something as boring or as, you know, something that you don't really want to do, just doing it for the sake of doing it has been a very important realization of mine, or life lesson, I should say. I also think one of the cool things about lockdown in 2020, 2021 versus the influenza lockdown of the 1920s is that we have the internet. You know,
for better or worse.
So, you know, it's, you don't get that same, you know, physical being near someone energy, but you get a similar mental energy. You know, and so it definitely helps going on the internet or like, you know, just watching TikTok for a little bit or for sure. Because it's just, you know, it reminds you that people are still out there. So that's awesome. That sounds so sad.
I mean, I feel like it is what it is. Sometimes I feel like I don't wish sadness on anyone, but I also like recognize that at this point in my life, a lot of really incredible things have come from awful periods of sadness, you know, that I would have placed a judgment on at the time and been like, this fucking sucks. Why would I have to go through this? And then it's always kind of on the other side of that. The universe is kind of ready to give you a break. You know, it's like, it's ready to kind of fill you with all the stuff that it feels like it took.
I loved what you said there about, like wanting to judge your sadness, because I think that like by judging the emotional state that you're in, I feel like you end up cutting yourself off from a lot of creative like inspiration that can naturally come. You know, if you look at an emotion as something that's shameful as opposed to something that is natural, human, understandable, you know, it prevents you from understanding why you're feeling that emotion, you know, what got you to that emotion and how you get out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So so.
Well, it sounds like you've been doing some emotional work during quarantine as well. Are you in therapy?
Everybody's had to. In terms of emotional work,
because I was just going to say, me and all of my friends are either in therapy or headed there. You know, and we'll go through these phases where it's like, oh, okay, so I know, you know, at this time of the year, it's probably really good for me to just like get back and do some sessions and start doing a little bit of like introspective work. But it's those kinds of things that have really helped me to kind of undo a lot of knots that I feel like I get. Like I undo a lot of the social anxieties, undo a lot of the weird things that I didn't have a name for, and also being able to rename other things. Like you and I have these experiences, and everybody has, like especially during coronavirus, where it's like, where we were talking about sadness, and it's like, but sadness is also just a name that we put on something. And sometimes if we're just able to sit with it, we see it as other things, like, oh, this is uncomfortability, resistance to change in some way, or you know what I mean? And it's it's being able to reframe those things that puts it in a different light and enables you to ask different questions and get out of this like linear rut in your brain of like, this is sadness and it has to go. You know, like you spend so much time fighting the feeling instead of like allowing space for it to kind of be there and explore it in a way that doesn't feel defensive. I don't know if I'm going too much into therapy land with you, but this has been really helpful for me.
I've been to therapy myself. I highly recommend it for everybody to at least go to therapy for a year. You know, I would like mental health resources to be much more affordable and much more accessible. Yeah, but that's another topic of conversation.
right.
You know, it's funny that you say that too, because one of the things that I think is a lifelong process is being able to allow what exists within you and what exists from things that you created to exist in the space that you've created them, or to exist in the space that you're experiencing them.
Yeah.
I had a professor in college. I took this theater class that it was like, I just needed a credit, but it turns out it was this super in-depth, like it was cool, like mindful creativity, but it was really like basically a process of breaking down your barriers for creating and for doing the work. And it definitely like took some emotional tolls on me, but through that process, it really was helpful to tear away, you know, my personal, like places I felt that I was personally inadequate, places that I, you know, was insecure about, and just allowing myself to create, to work, to write, and not pass judgment on what I was writing at the time. Right. Because the actual process of doing the work is just as important, if not more important, than the inspiration or, you know, the places that you want to be. So. I love that. And I feel like people like overcomplicate the process sometimes too. Sometimes the process is just being present. It's exactly what you're saying. It's just like showing up and being willing to put a writing utensil in your hand. Well, and there has to be some sort of detachment from your work, because this is the thing that especially with artists that are just starting out, is that there is this idea that everything that you do in the moment has to be great. Right. You know, and as a result, people get really attached to the work that they think is great because it's better than anything that they've done before, but not necessarily better than anything that they will do. Right. You know, and so I think that there is a lot of a lot of intermixing between the idea of something that is creatively inspired and technically good.
Yes.
You know, like that. Yeah.
Right. That's a good distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, when I give feedback to other people's songs or to other people's writing, I'm not critiquing the inspiration behind it or the emotion that's behind it. What I generally guide them towards or make comments about is, okay, like, can I understand this? Does this make sense? Like, is this you speaking, or is this who you think should be speaking? Right. And then, you know, on like the sonic quality and, you know, and like the sonic mixing, you know, can you hear everything? Like, does this snare fit, or is it tuned to be a tritone of the actual key of the song and sound completely out of place? Right, know? Right. So it's amazing how many people don't know to tune their drums. Like, it's an instrument. You got to put it in tune.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like it's really easy to tune stuff if you're working in like Ableton or Pro Tools. It's really easy to tune samples, but like doing the actual acoustic work, there's still times where I'm like, it feels like such trickery. Like, we have a good setup here in the studio. It's like anytime anybody wants to come in, we have it set up to where you can lay down tracks that work. It's totally fine. Unless you're just like looking for some kind of Metallica snare sound, you know, like in the room, then you're good. Like, the kit is fine. But I feel like there are times where I'm constantly getting on the phone with people who I feel like are listening for different things than I am, who I can say, hey, I need this to sound like this. And I don't have like the next 3.5 hours to like figure out how to get this snare to do what I'm doing. But there are people that are like super good at it. It sounds like that might be something that you're kind of in tune to. Are you on a kit a lot, or?
No, I would love to be on a kit so much more. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I recently started working with a buddy I used to play in a band with. And he's like one of my best music friends, and he's killer drummer. Yeah. And so it's like, but he gets so like, he definitely gets frustrated when I'm like, okay, like literally, like, let's just like move that nut like halfway to the right. Let's move the mic like just a bit over. Yeah. Don't hit on the edge of the snare, hit like right in the center. Like, we need that, like, you know, and cause I'm always under the belief that if it doesn't sound 90% of where it needs to be on the recording, it's not going to sound like you want it to. Don't fix it in post. You can never fix it in post. You can only make it better, but not.
You can only highlight the flaws.
You can't polish a turd. That's the old saying, right?
That's it. That's awesome, man. Oh, I feel like I could do this with you all day. Just like talking about production techniques and miking techniques. I'm totally that guy. I'm like half an inch to the right. Let's like angle a little bit over here. But that's also, I feel like it's fun. It's like what we're talking about at the beginning of the conversation. Like, part of that, like, your artistry is kind of what gets your attention. You know what I mean? It's like all those different things, all those different pieces. They're fun to think about. Like, they're fun to play around with and to get neurotic about. And that's part of the
dismay of others.
To the dismay of others. Yeah. Maybe not so fun when there are 5 people behind you and they're like, we just need to track something. God damn it. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how you grew up in terms of, did you grow up in a religious household or not, and maybe like segue that into your best and most recent ideas about purpose and meaning, and if there is a God, if it matters, kind of where you are hot on the heels of your Siddhartha song.
Man, I also love this question because of who you are. Because I was an Eleventyseven fan, like, as a 7th grader, like, you know, and very obviously, if I knew your band, I grew up in the church.
That's why I asked the question.
I do have to say, there was a magical period of about like 2003 to 2008 or 2009 where, like, you would hear a song on the radio, or like your friend would make you a mix CD or something like that. Yeah. And then you would get wait, this is a Christian band?
Did you live for that moment? No wrong answers, just truthful ones.
I loved that, like, you know, I kind of recognize I don't want to say the evils of it now, but like, you know, the CCM industry was very much an industry, you know, and it's a shame because I do think a lot of artists that kind of got caught up in that are, you know, it was more just for commercial appeal than anything, and to be able to push a record, you know.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and that's kind of one of my, so I grew up in the church, but I am a practicing Christian, but I have a very hard time with the state of Western Christianity.
Sure.
It's really hard for me to, you know, read a story in the Bible about Jesus going to the temple and overturning the people selling things in the temple when, you know, you turn on the TV and, you know, Joel Osteen's on there, or, you know, the prosperity gospel is something that is taught on a regular basis. And,
right.
You know, and it's just, you know, it really, I think that's one of the things that is also so Christian, though, is that, like, it's Jesus did not, like, if you read, like, the stories of Jesus, like, it wasn't like this, you know, right, wrong, like, this person's bad, this person's good thing. It was kind of this highlight that, like, yeah, we're all kind of crappy human beings, and, like, the, you know, and so I think that's one of the things that has interestingly kept me in the religion, not necessarily in church. I kind of go back and forth with church and stuff. But, you know, I've also explored other religions, and quite frankly, I was agnostic for several years. It wasn't until very recently that I got back into understanding, you know, what it looks like and what it actually means.
Coronavirus brought you back. I'm just kidding. That's not true.
Well, no, I mean, the isolation has definitely given me time to dig into more, like, philosophy and reading books. And I think one of the things that it boils down to for me is, like, it's not necessarily about, I don't know, like, I wouldn't say I'm evangelical by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not, like, you know, I'm pretty liberal, pretty leftist, if that's the right word.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'm not, I have a bit of a different ideology. Anyway, but I think really where it boils down to for me is the framework of how you view your life. And, you know, I'm going to get in a little bit of heat with probably the church for saying this, but, like, if your framework is, like, if it works for you, then it works, you know, like, I don't think that there's necessarily a right and wrong, but I do think that oftentimes we get into situations and get into negative thought patterns where, like, we settle on the concept that, like, oh, I don't understand anything, or, like, I don't know what I believe. You know? Life of Pi has a really good chapter where they talk about, or where the author talks about the idea of religion. And it's, you know, if you are agnostic and you're just staying, like, you're just staying in a place of indecision. Yeah. You know, and it's hard to make decisions and hard to be in control and hard to have an understanding of the framework for which you make decisions in. Yeah. And so I guess that's my biggest thing. It's like having a framework. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not really a pious person, I would say.
You could have fooled me. I'm just kidding. I understand what you're saying. Like, you, I think what interests me is that I would, for anybody that listens to the show or whatever, I feel like this probably gets hammered in ad nauseum. I try to be very, like, just like open about where I am and about what's happening. And, like,
where are you, if you don't mind me asking?
So, like, in terms of Christianity, I did grow up in the church. I grew up, like, very hardcore evangelical. I was a part of a lot of stuff when I was a kid, a lot of, like, evangelical movements and organizations when I was a kid. And I always like I struggled a lot with my mental health as a child as well, because I took all of this shit very, very seriously. Yeah. And it happened like over the course of a few years when I got to college. I kind of had my moment where I was like, I don't really know if I believe all of this stuff, or this doesn't quite make sense, or, things start to not add up. You start to kind of reach the, where your brain development is to a place where you can hold a few thoughts and ideas in your mind at the same time and compare and contrast. Mm-hmm. And so there was that. And then we ended up getting signed like after my second semester of college. And so I just like got thrown into everything in the like Christian rock world, which was just a complete dismantling of everything that I thought like about Christianity, the way it was presented in America. And I knew enough about Christianity to be like, I don't think all of this is horseshit, but I think whatever is happening here in America, whatever's happening in this industry, whatever's happening like here within evangelicalism is incredibly toxic and is doing so much damage to so many people. And I eventually just kind of came to this place where I'm like, I am absolutely a spiritual seeker. I'm so much more interested now in what figures like Jesus had to say, and find so much more like depth and life and richness in what Christ has to say, like particularly in the Bible. Like now that I'm not a Christian, like I don't associate with that. Like, but at the same time, I feel like in this weird place in life, I see the suffering that a lot of beliefs cause people. And so I feel drawn to Christians who I feel like are trying to make sense out of it and trying to alleviate the suffering that they're experiencing in their own life, and to sort of deconstruct some of the beliefs that are causing that suffering in them. So that's where I feel like I fit in right now. But I kind of, like the longer that I'm here, the longer I love it all. Like, the good ideas when you come across them. Like, the good thoughts, the things that feel more true when you come across them, because there's like an elevation in your spirit. Like when you hear information that like resonates with you, you're like, yes, this makes so much more sense, that like the Bible is not all about everything I was taught it was about. And like I grew up in a very specific culture and subculture of a subculture, that like gave me these really weird ideas about spirituality and religion, and even about other people and about how to interface with them. I'm still undoing, because I know that the direction that I'm on now, I'm experiencing more life. Everything that Christianity promised me, I'm finding it outside of that, just in the search and pursuit and in the being, of here in the moment with people, than I ever was like, buckling down. Like another scripture memory verse is not going to get me any more happiness. You know what I mean? like responding to somebody in exactly the way that Christ would is not going to bring me any more happiness, and beating myself up over not being this perfect person, or being able to like relate to every single thing that I come into in life in the right way, in the way that Christ would have related to it. It's not going to make me happier. Like, you are what you are, and you like, especially for the day that you're in, you know what I mean? Whatever's happening is so much greater than anything I could control. Like, looking back on it now, I feel like I was always just going to be here. I was always going to be born, into a Christian family. That was always going to like not work. I was always going to like come out of that and start thinking about the world in a different way. And I was always going to be drawn back to these things inside of it that I feel like are really beautiful and life-giving. That was way too long of a rant for you, Dean, and I'm sorry for taking you on it.
That was very beautiful to hear. Yeah. Like I love, honestly, like I love hearing that. And I think I've been hearing that a lot more, especially, as there's been kind of this identity crisis within the American church. I've had a lot of friends that just recently left this one church that I grew up near. That was like, it was the church that I always wanted to go to growing up. I went to a small Methodist, like it was the Chuck E. Cheese
of churches for you.
Yeah, literally. Like they had like a massive warehouse. It was like, the typical like super cool like youth group like type stuff. But a lot of my friends have left that church recently, and it really just goes to show that like, even if you are the best church, or like, like there is no like there is, gosh, this sounds like very nihilistic, but there is nothing good under the sun. Everything always has potential to be corrupted. Everything always, and that's, but I think that is, to me, one of the most interesting things about Jesus, and about the whole story of Christianity is that, at that point, it doesn't matter, because there's the acceptance that, hey, you're going to mess up, you're going to do some things you're not too proud of. And you're still loved, you're still who you are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not really the message that's taught, but yeah. And then also, I think the thing that really, I hate saying this, but I really do, I think the best way to put myself is diet Christian or JD Christian. I feel like I would fit well in an Episcopalian church or something.
Sure, yeah.
But I think the thing that that really has sort of reaffirmed, or at least brought me back to where I feel safe is the idea of identity. One of my, frankly, the only pastor I really listen to on a regular basis is Tim Keller, who's based out of Redeemer Presbyterian in New York. And he has a very, very good chapter about the idea of identity. And I think this is one of the things that living in such an individualistic society as America, we put a lot of emphasis on who we are as people, who we are as individual, as individual persons. There's this concept that, or there's this pervading idea that we all have to be unique individuals, that we all have to be, at the top of our game, that we all, or that we have to have something that defines our life, and it's really easy, if you're in music, it's really easy to get wrapped up in being okay, well, music is the number one thing in my life. What happens if you lose your hearing?
Over-identifying with that egoic part of yourself that's constantly creating who you are by the information that you receive about yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, and then on the flip side, it's in community-driven cultures, your identity is formed through the people around you.
Right.
And what I think is really funny is that, a lot of the stories we read from, 16th century up until really the Industrial Revolution, or really up until World War II, there were stories of, hero sacrifice and people sacrificing for the good of others.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the 20th century when we saw the blooming idea of the self that we started to see more narratives of people rejecting the communities that they grew up in to find the true essence of their self.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, both of those are beautiful narratives, but I think oftentimes we have a tendency to go too far in either direction. You're either too focused on your community to the point where your mental health is sacrificed and you're just kind of a grumpy person to be around, or you're so individualistic that you don't think about other people, or you don't think to help others. So
right.
And I think that is one of the things about a Christian identity is that it has the capability to fulfill both. So yeah.
I love that. I love those sentiments. I love hearing about where you are right now. And it sounds like you're on a really, really incredible journey through all of that.
I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we all are, whether or not we want to be. Yeah, that's what I think. But yeah, dude, I really appreciate you sharing all of that stuff with me. I know that we have definitely gone the time for the show. Is there anything that we did not discuss that you wanted to get into, or that you feel like you would want to reach out to the listenership of 11D Life in any way with?
Man, I don't know. I don't really.
Okay.
This is what happens. I'm really good at just talking to with people, but as soon as it's do you have any questions? I'm
I was happy to ride the wave, not drive the ship. Come on.
Exactly.
Yes.
This happens to me all the time.
That's awesome. Well, I have to tell you, I am so pleased with our conversation. You are a pleasure and a treasure. And
same goes for you. I love talking about music and about life and stuff. So.
Yes. Well, I just want to thank you for your time, and we're going to link everybody to the latest and greatest from you in the show notes for the show. Yeah, and I hope that you'll consider coming back on again sometime in the future. That'd be great.
I would love to. I hope I'm invited back.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
So.